While we look down at our phones, they'll drop a bomb from a drone, then an explosion. We should have known it. We stood on top of mountains, we've been to space before. We had our dogs and houses, we dug up dinosaurs. We built those bombs are dropping, we fought in all their wars. Now that the sky...
According to NBC, they're going to take the military away from Trump. In other words, a coup. There's no other way to slice it. According to a report in NBC News, which is not some far-right publication, Democratic lawmakers, advocacy groups, former government officials are, quote, quietly devising plans to stop former President Donald Trump from taking control of the United States military if elected president in 2024, in November of this year.
Like Myanmar?
Yeah, like Myanmar. Like, this isn't Bolivia, right? We're turning into like a banana republic here. This is mainstream American NBC News telling us this. This isn't like some publication on some what people would say is an extremist right-wing website or something like that. No, this is NBC News telling us what the deep state is planning. The NBC News report is titled "This: Fears Grow that Trump will use the military in dictatorial ways if he returns to the White House, among those being mentioned for Trump's defense secretary, etc., etc. Fears grow, Trump will use the military. And this report details how the deep state has created a, quote, loose-knit network of public interest groups and lawmakers that are preparing to foil any efforts for Trump to use the military to carry out his political agenda, essentially wresting control of the military away from Trump. You can't make this up. I mean, this is literally in the text. You can read it for yourselves.
But Biden is using the military to start endless wars and continue endless wars. So he can use the military if it's actually being used to continue to kill people. Bonus points if they're brown people.
Right, but this NBC News report, which we'll go in more detail here in a second, is the idea that, oh, what if Trump uses the military to go after political adversaries? Oh, you mean like how the Biden administration weaponized the Department of Justice to go after political enemies?
Right.
Right? I mean, so Biden, to your point, is literally doing what they're worried that Trump will do. And they're worried that he will then use the Department of Justice to go after political enemies. He'll use the military to go after political enemies. And he will become an authoritarian leader. Former Trump Pentagon advisor Colonel Douglas Macgregor.
Can you, just before you make that point, though, because I read the book by the special investigators of the Mueller investigation, Andrew Weissman, and they tried really hard to accuse Trump of misusing power during their investigations, and they could not conclusively find it. So we have precedents of him being in the White House.
We have 4 years of precedents.
They tried to prove that he was doing just that and were unable.
Yeah.
And so it's such a baseless fear, and we have a guy doing it.
Right. But this is what the liberals and liberal media are concerned about. Oh, and by the way, the neocons. So the Nikki Haley wing.
My point is, I don't really think that they believe it themselves.
Well, that's what Colonel Douglas Macgregor, I think he thinks that they don't believe it themselves either, and yet they're doing it anyway. And they've done it to great success already. Listen to what Colonel Macgregor just told me.
Officers, it's pure bullshit. I mean, it's just nonsense. So, and they've also tried to essentially turn it into a non-white organization. I mean, that's obvious. Look at the picks that they've made. So I know, no doubt that's probably real in their minds. Now, will it work the way they want it to? I don't know. They could end up with a very divided military that doesn't do what they want it to do. You know, remember that they wanted to get rid of everybody and anybody who remotely leaned to the right in the General Officer Corps and the admirals in the Navy. So they've succeeded.
They've succeeded. So they want to remake the Pentagon. They want to do this. It's total bullshit, what Colonel Macgregor says, but it's absolutely, they've done it before, and what's to stop them from doing it now? Now, though, they've all gone on the record. These people have gone on the record to NBC News. These aren't like anonymous sources floating around. No. So let's go through this NBC News report, because there are off-the-record sources, but a lot of people on the record telling NBC exactly what they plan to do to Trump. NBC, of course, has deep connections to the Pentagon and the CIA. You can read the Cato Institute's report on how members of the CIA went to work for NBC News. So there's a deep connection here with the intelligence community and NBC News. Journalist Paul Sperry also confirming the NBC News report, saying, breaking, Obama DOJ official Mary McCord, part of General Flynn coup, secretly worked with the January 6th committee's Red Team and Purple Team investigators. Quote, we're already starting to put together a team to think through the most damaging types of things Trump might do, end quote. They're building a team to undermine a future president of the United States. So let's just go through this NBC News report a little bit more in depth here, because it's absolutely bonkers and crazy. You can just kind of roll it here on the screen, Philip. America's commander-in-chief has vast powers at his disposal. Some well-known, others not so much. Some lawmakers and pro-democracy advocates worried there may be nothing stopping a president from mobilizing the military to intervene in elections, police American streets, or quash domestic protests. Some lawmakers on Capitol Hill worry that Trump might invoke the Insurrectionist Act to involve the armed forces in the face of domestic protests, or if the midterm elections don't go his way. One of my favorite quotes, though, is from Senator Richard Blumenthal, is crafting a bill that would clarify the Insurrectionist Act and give Congress and courts some say in its use instead of the president. And chances of passage are slim, given that Republicans control the House and are largely loyal to Trump. And he says, Richard Blumenthal says, there are an array of horrors that could result from Donald Trump's unrestricted use of the Insurrection Act, Blumenthal said in an interview. A malignantly motivated president could use it in a vast variety of dictatorial ways unless at some point the military itself resisted what they deemed to be an unlawful order. I mean, it goes on and on and on in here.
But I do recall that this was part of the narrative in the 2016 campaign as well. They said that a lot of military people are telling high-up media sources that they won't follow Trump's command because he's a blowhard and they don't like him. So they did try this before. This
Right.
is a repeat. Whether or not they're actually sources who are intending on doing it this time around is a different story.
Well, we already know Mark Milley did. We already know that related to the January 6th and even before that.
Yeah.
And Trump's ability to use nuclear weapons or have access to certain types of weapons, that the president, the commander-in-chief of the military. Under the Constitution of the United States, he is the commander-in-chief of the U.S. military. So when you have literally members of Congress, a loose-knit organization, Democrats and otherwise, who are saying they're going to wrest control of the military away from the commander-in-chief, that's not the United States of America. That is a coup.
Yes,
That is something entirely different. The United States president has the power of the military. That's how it's always been. And by the way, wait a second. You're worried that the president of the United States might actually put American troops, American forces in the streets of the United States? What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? In fact, for decades, the United States military was stationed at the U.S. southern border. For decades. That's why people didn't come across the border. So what's wrong with actually stationing American troops at the southern border again? Would that be an insurrection? Would that be a violation of the Constitution? No, it's in the president's authority. And many, many Republican presidents and Democratic presidents have done so and used the U.S. military to protect our nation. What about having people, American forces, actually in the streets of America to protect our cities right now? Have you seen the crime wave that's sweeping our country? There's an idea. Would it be so bad, actually, to have American forces actually being used here at home instead of in Syria? Or in Yemen, for crying out loud? Or being sent to Israel? We could use the National Guard, which is supposed to be here to guard nationally our country, here in the United States instead of being sent to Somalia, which is happening. It's just an idea. So they're so scared about that. I'm just kind of appalled at that idea.